Dollars and Sense, the show that awakens the entrepreneurial mind and spirit to discover your business potential. Now, here are your hosts, Hunter Ford and Jason Hayes.
Good afternoon, Wilmington. Welcome to Dollars and Sense on the Big Talker 106.7. I'm your host, Hunter Ford. Jason Hayes can't be with us this week, but he is in here in spirit, and will be listening to us live on the airwaves. We've got an interesting show today. We've got some neat guests that are really a big part of Wilmington's fabric here in all parts of Wilmington and in several different areas. Reggie Barnes and Jocelyn Tracey from Eastern Skateboard Supply. We're going to go ahead and jump right to it since Jason isn't here to help carry me today. So, Reggie and Jocelyn, welcome to the show.
Oh, hey, thanks for having us.
Definitely.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So, Reggie, we're going to dive right in here because you have a really interesting story to tell. And Dollars and Sense is all about teaching young entrepreneurs that are looking for that inspiration to go ahead and dive right in and get into business and become an entrepreneur and become a businessman themselves. And it's also the people that are out there that are already in business that want to hear that everybody else goes through the same struggles that they're going through. And over the last 12, 13 weeks, we've had a lot of different interesting business owners in many different genres. And what's really neat about what you do is you're in each of those different genres, I feel like. Not only are you in the retail business, but you're in the real estate business, and you're also in the wholesale business. So you kind of complete a circle that creates that interesting story that people really want to hear about here in Wilmington on the Big Talker. To go ahead and dive right in, why don't you tell the listening audience what it is that Eastern Skateboard Supply is?
Okay, well, Eastern Skateboard Supply is a wholesale company that specializes in skateboards and accessories. We also sell a lot of surfing accessories as well, which we kind of diversified about 20 years ago. We added surf wax and leashes and traction and things like that. But we started in 1985 selling skateboards, decks, trucks, wheels, bearings, grip tape, all the clothing associated with it, anything basically that a retail store would need to be into the skateboard business.
Now, in 1985, skateboarding was still kind of new. How did you get into skateboarding? Were you a skateboarder yourself?
Yeah, actually, I started skating in the mid-'70s in Cary, North Carolina, which is where I grew up. And, it started out just as a hobby, and then, started competing, here and there in contests, ended up in the late 70s turning pro, and then, ended up starting my company in 1985, like I said. But it all started for fun, and then I was able, fortunately, to make the transition into business.
And that's a hard transition to make, especially when you're having fun and you're going out and you're competing and doing contests. You're a young guy, and, you're just trying to make $1 and survive.
Yeah.
Was Eastern your first business, or did you have any business before that?
Well, I actually did have a construction company, and I, built decks and did trim and did a little bit of a lot of things. Never really built a house from the ground up, but, I was a carpenter, and I was doing the carpentry and being a pro skater at the same time, and it really didn't mix very well.
So you kind of lived a double life. You'd go and do contests in the weekends, and then you'd come back and you'd have to work a regular construction job, and you almost had a double identity, it sounds like.
Yeah, I did. I always refer to it as like an identity crisis. I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue the construction industry or if I wanted to, to pursue being a pro skater. But, it all started with a good friend, which turned into a partner later, that called and made an offer for us to start a company together. And that was in 1985. Skip Flythe called me and pretty much never looked back once we started Eastern Skateboard Supply.
So while you were in those early years and you were doing contests, were most of those here on the East Coast, or did you have to travel considerably?
I traveled a lot. Most of them were actually in California.
Did you do it on your dime?
The first contest that I turned pro was in 1980, and I did do it on my own dime. Actually slept in my car. It was in San Diego. Slept in my car, paid my own entry fee, skateboarding was in a slump then, so there wasn't a lot going on. It was the first pro freestyle contest that had happened in years. And so anyway, I went down and did that and, covered all my own expenses, and I got 5th place. So I won back the entry fee. So I broke even.
Nice. What kind of skaters were involved in skateboarding at that time? Who was some of your competition at that time?
Well, one in particular that some listeners may know of is a guy named Rodney Mullen.
Oh, who doesn't know that name?
And Rodney, that was his first pro contest too.
Oh, wow.
And he got first. And like I said, I got 5th. But some of the guys that I had looked up to prior to having moved to California, Tim Scroggs, Doug Pineapple Saladino was in the contest, Chris Chappett, who had been the world champ, Steve Rocco, a lot of guys, that I had looked up to were there. So I was pretty nervous, to say the least.
Oh man, I can't imagine. I mean, you're guys that have become heroes, and now you're skating against them. Yeah. Did you drive all the way across the country, or did you fly?
I did. I drove. Well, what happened is when I got out of high school, I went on tour for Pepsi.
Oh, cool.
And they paid us, pretty well for being an 18-year-old and doing demos. And I saved all of the money from having gone on tour with Pepsi. Took that, moved to California. My mother actually drove with me from Cary to California to make sure I got there safely, and then she flew back home. And that was early in the year in 1980, and they didn't have that contest until late in 1980. So I was out there for about 8 months. Where I worked at a gas station, I worked at Pacific Coast Deli on PCH. I was trying to not spend all the money that I had saved, doing the demos. And but anyway, my goal was to turn pro and to earn money, and because you know how it was back in the day. I mean, you accept money for doing something you love. You're considered a professional. Oh yeah. So everybody was always worried about losing their amateur status. Like Rodney Mullen, who I just mentioned, who got first in that contest in 1980. I don't even think Rodney took his money. I think he gave it back because he wanted to maintain his amateur status. Well, but back then it was a bigger concern. I think nowadays, when we were all worried about if it went to the Olympics.
Oh yeah.
Would we be able to be a part of it? Well, now, sure enough, it is going to be in the Olympics.
I know, finally, after all these years.
All these years, but we're too old now.
Has surfing made it into the Olympics as well?
Yeah, surfing's going to be in the next Olympics as well.
They both came in right at the same time, didn't they?
Sure did.
From what I understand, yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, and that's even with other athletes out there that play soccer, football, other different sports. I remember playing soccer with a gentleman that I grew up with that had played semi-professional in England, and we had to vacate all of our titles that we won my junior and senior year because everybody wondered, why is this kid so good? And we ended up we won those 2 years in a row, and we had to give it all back. So that's a really important part about getting started, and I mean it's got to be difficult. You paid your own entryway, Rodney did as well. So for him to not take that money, that's huge, especially for the forethought that this could be an Olympic sport, and I want to be able to compete for Team USA.
Yeah.
Now, while you were skating and you were still doing construction, how many years did you own that construction company?
Actually, only a couple years. I went to school here. I moved from Cary to Wilmington to go to Cape Fear Tech, it was called at the time, and I took business. And once I graduated from Cape Fear Tech and I started the construction business, I always wanted to work for myself. I wanted the flexibility. My dad always said, son, if you want to have true freedom, you need to work for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And so I always remembered that. And but like we said earlier, being a pro skater on the weekends and working construction during the week, it just didn't really blend together too well.
It didn't come together. No. That's right. Well, I think that's a really interesting way that you got started. And that career in construction ended up helping you out as you started to evolve and as you started Eastern Skateboard Supply, because when you got caught up with Skip and Homer, your partners that would become, somebody had to build out the facility, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, it's good you brought that up. We had Skip Flythe, his family had a nice building up in downtown Raleigh, and I was living in Wrightsville Beach at the time when we first started Eastern. And we didn't want to waste that nice retail space he had there. It was a great location. So that's one way we were able to save money is I moved up there and did all the upfit myself, hung the sheetrock, shot the studs into the wall, did all the painting. And So we were able to get in, with low overhead. So
Nice.
it helped having the construction background.
Well, I think that we're off to a really good start, and we've got a commercial break that's getting ready to come up here. We're going to dive into a little bit more about how you got started with Eastern Skateboard Supply and how you and your partners got together in that time frame of around 1985. You were kind of giving up your construction business and, use that trade to carry it on and to start developing this new idea that you had kind of come together with these new partners. So we'll carry it on a little bit further here on Dollars and Sense on Wilmington's Big Talker FM. Welcome back to Dollars and Sense. I'm your host, Hunter Ford. I'm in the studio today with Reggie Barnes and Jocelyn Tracey from Eastern Skateboard Supply and many other businesses. We got started off at the beginning of the show talking a little bit about Reggie's background in professional skateboarding and how this business that he operates today came to fruition. You got started professional skateboarding and people reached out to you knowing that you were a smart guy, that you had a business savvy nature to you. And tell the listening audience a little bit about how that got started. How did the relationship get started with your partner, Skip, to begin Eastern Skateboard Supply?
Okay, well, I was living in Wrightsville Beach, and I'll never forget the phone call I got. Skip reached out to me and said he had a business proposition. Would I be interested in hearing him out? And I was like, yeah, I'm always open-minded, so... He had a vacation home at Wrightsville at the time, and so I went down to his house. And I didn't mention earlier, but back in the 70s, Skip sold skateboards at his bike shop up in Raleigh. And there was one brand called Bain Skateboards, which in the 70s was one of the most popular brands. Well, Skip sold a lot of Bain. In fact, he sold enough to where he became a distributor for Bain Skateboards. And so he started the East Coast Bain skateboard team around that same time. Well, I happened to ride for him back then. So we had known each other from way back.
Oh, cool.
And then, when skateboarding sort of died out a little bit in the late 70s, he stopped selling it at his retail stores. And so that was the end of that. So like I said, we knew each other from then. So he called me and I went and heard him out. And his idea was to start a distributorship. And I think his main hope was not so much to build the distributorship into something large, but he was a smart businessman, and he wanted to buy things at distributor price and then sell it at retail through his bike shops. He had like 3 shops,
right?
And which was smart. And the reason that he reached out to me was because, being that I was skateboarding as a professional and I was regularly going to California and traveling around. Well, I got to know a lot of the manufacturers, and he was thinking that, well, if I get Reggie involved, maybe we'll get some brands that I might not be able to get without his connections.
Right.
And so that was his idea, and it ended up working out.
Now, you were working and riding for that Bain skateboard team, but you also had a relationship with Walker Skateboards too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the Bain thing was in the 70s. That was like 77. But in the early 80s, I was sponsored by a guy named Bruce Walker that owned Walker Skateboards. And Bruce was a pro himself. So Bruce, back in the 70s, was one of my heroes.
Yeah.
He had a segment in Skateboard Magazine called Who's Hot? And Bruce was one of the original guys in the Who's Hot Skateboard Magazine articles.
He's still hot.
Yeah, Bruce is great. He still skates to this day. He's 66 years old.
Oh,
the guy
wow.
rips. And he lives in Hawaii now. But anyway, I rode for Bruce. And but he owned Walker Skateboards, but he also was a distributor out of Satellite Beach, Florida. And when Skip called and made the offer to start this business, I thought, well, wait a minute, I don't want to step on my buddy's toes, Bruce, being that he's a distributor. We're both on the East Coast. So I called Bruce and ran it by him, and sure enough, he embraced it. And instead of saying, no, you'd be stepping on my toes, we're both on the East Coast, he didn't. He said quite the opposite. He said, Reg, with the way skateboarding's growing, he said, it's a matter of time. If you don't do it, somebody else will.
Oh, wow.
So go ahead and do it, and thank you for asking.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget Bruce being that way about it, because in all honesty, if he'd have said no, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Well, and it's so important to maintain those relationships that you begin with people.
Absolutely.
I remember when I first opened Momentum Surf and Skate, I had put in an application to sell, and I don't know if you were on your bike, but I think you were, and you gave me a call, and I was working at Deluxe at the time downtown, and you had asked, hey, there's another person that I sell to, Double Wide Skate Shop, and they've opened up a location downtown as well, and they just opened up a month ago. How is that relationship going to work? How can I sell to both of you? Mm-hmm. And I remember that my answer was, we're going to be a little bit smaller. We're not going to be a core skate shop, but we want to make sure that we have a little bit of this and a little bit of that to, offer our customers a complete package. But our store was only going to be 540 square feet, so I wasn't going to be carrying that much of anything to a certain degree.
That's right. I remember that.
But
I do too.
I think you were on your bicycle too. It was kind of funny. I could hear the wind in the background. I said, man, this guy's got the life. But that's exactly how you were treated. And it's really neat that you took on that same characteristic and that you made it part of your business, because I think that that's a really important thing that a business owner can do, is to humbly fit into the world with his competition. Sometimes they're going to be your friends, and sometimes, they're not going to be that friendly.
That's right.
So
Reggie always thinks about the customer. If we get an application, just like we had gotten yours, to think about how close he was to another customer. Reggie's always putting himself in that other guy's shoes.
Yeah.
How's this going to affect his business?
Right.
How can we make it work?
And that's a really unique quality, and I think that's one of the reasons that you've been as successful as you've been. So we've got this new idea. You've gotten approval from the people that you respect and look up to, and you use that construction knowledge that you had from Barnes Construction from that 1983 to around 1985 period. You teamed up with Skip. Y'all built out this facility that you could do your distribution out of the back and be a wholesaler. And you kind of made a little bit of jump forward and did a little retail. Tell the listening audience a little bit how Endless Grind came to about in 1986, just a year after you started Eastern Skateboard Supply.
Okay. Like I said, I was in Wrightsville when Skip called me and we decided to start this company. That was in 1985. Well, right about the same time, I was contacted by a group that was doing a trade show open to the public in Raleigh. It was called the Southern Sports and Outdoor Show. Okay. Well, they, knew about this pro skateboarder guy living in Wrightsville, and they reached out to me unrelated to this business I was doing with Skip. And they wanted me to be basically a consultant for them. They wanted to add skateboarding to their outdoor trade show, right? They thought it'd be just another draw to get more people there. And so I agreed to do it. And I thought, well, man, this is perfect timing. If I move up to Raleigh and Skip and I start a retail store in the same building we're doing Eastern out of, it'd be a great way for me to launch the retail store, because it was right at the exact same time. It was a coincidence, the way the timing was. And so went up there and did it. And I built a half pipe. It was 16 feet wide half pipe with like a foot of vert. And I used my construction background to build that. And I'll never forget the event. It was a success, but it was a lot of the guys from Virginia Beach that ended up turning pro, the Gutierrez brothers, Andy Howe, Steve Caballero, who to this day is a legend. We actually had Stevie come out from California to be a celebrity at the event. And anyway, we gave out our Endless Grind shirts, and even though our store wasn't open yet, it was open in like 2 weeks from the event. So it was just a nice way to launch the grand opening of the store.
Now, there was a little bit of surprise when you got to this outdoor show. You had some new competition that was opening up right around the same time in Cary, I believe, right?
Yes, there was a shop called Outside Surf Shop, and they, the people that put on the show, they were smart. They were good business people. What I didn't realize, they had reached out to this other shop and invited them to come be a part of the event as well. And they probably, charged them for space to be there. Well, turns out, even though we were competitors, the other shop, we became friends. And he ended up being a customer of Eastern's as well. He was in Cary. We were in Raleigh. There's enough room for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that kind of worked out good. But
at this trade show, did you have a booth set up? Were you ready to go?
I didn't really have a booth. My main thing was the skateboard contest that we put on. So we held an event, not only a demo with Caballero being there. He was like the celebrity that came. But we did a contest at the Half Pipe.
Yeah.
And so that's mainly what I was there to do, is put on the event. We also did a freestyle part inside one of the buildings there. It was at the fairgrounds, right by the Dorton Arena.
Now, freestyle, you mentioned that. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of the guys out of that original freestyle group have gone on to be really successful entrepreneurs, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, they have. It's kind of funny. You got Kevin Harris that ended up opening Ultimate Distribution in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Jean-Marc Vissette in France. He opened V7, which is a successful distribution company in France, still in business to this day. You got Per Willender that opened Blitz Distribution. He ended up becoming partners with Tony Hawk, and they started Birdhouse Skateboards.
Oh, wow.
Steve Rocco and Rodney Mullen, they started World Industries, and then later Dwindle Distribution and many other brands.
For the listening
Pierre
audience.
Andre, too, which started Etnies, which is a major success.
Huge.
Yeah.
And for the listening audience, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the brands that they identify with are part of these NHS and these big distribution companies. And you guys out of that freestyler group really made a big impact in changing how skateboard is perceived today, because skateboard had that rebirth. We're going to continue this story after the commercial break here on Wilmington's Big Talker FM 106.7, Dollars and Sense. Welcome back to Dollars and Sense on the Big Talker 106.7 here in Wilmington, North Carolina. We've got an interesting show today. We're talking to Reggie Barnes and Jocelyn Tracey from Eastern Skateboard Supply. Jason Hayes has the weekend off. He's spending a little family time, so he'll be back on the airwaves next week. We got started talking a little bit about Reggie's career in skateboarding that lasted from about 1979 till 1991. During that time, he had a construction company. He started Eastern Skateboard Supply in 1985, then opened a retail store because he was a distributor. He had access to everything that was important to opening a retail store. Skateboarding had taken a little bit of dip from the early 70s, had gone away a little bit, was coming back, and this distributorship that you started basically with some guys that were dabbling a little bit in skateboards, but your partners were really more into bicycles and a lot of that other action sport at that time. And y'all made it work, but things didn't take off right from the get-go, did they?
No, it was a slow start. As a matter of fact, between 85 and 1990, my partners decided that they were going to get out of it, and they were willing to sell me their shares. There was one other partner. I'm not sure if we mentioned Homer Kroom. He was. There were three of us. It was Skip Flythe and Homer, who was also in the bike business as well, but he specialized in the BMX part of the bicycle industry. And anyway, so I was able to buy both of those guys out. I was young. I didn't have any collateral, and went to the bank. They listened to my story. They thought, wow, what a good little thing you got going there. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do anything for you because you don't have any collateral. And we all know now that's how banks work. And I'd be the same way. If you're in the business of loaning money, you got to make sure you get it back. If not, get your hands on something else.
Oh, yeah.
So my dad was with me when we went to the bank. And my dad ended up putting up our home that I grew up in as collateral for a line one of equity. I think they called it that, yeah, line one equity. But anyway, he did that, and he loaned me the money to buy out my partners.
He believed in you.
He did believe in me, and I'm so grateful, obviously, for that opportunity he gave me. I did it, but the cool thing is I was able to pay my dad back. Now, this was close to Christmas, and holiday. Christmas is the busiest time in the skateboard industry. And I don't remember if it was 4-6 weeks. Wasn't long. I was able to pay my dad back.
Oh, wow. That quick?
Yeah, because we already had money in the bank and we already had a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
And I was able to pay my dad back. And of course, he and myself shared that with the bank. So because they were kind of looking over my shoulder at what was going on. And so long story short, the bank ended up after that point giving me a tiny line of credit. It was like $25,000.
Oh, wow.
Start small, you know?
Yeah.
And
but
then,
I mean, at that time, that was a lot of money.
It was.
That's where Reggie-ism comes in, by the way, Hunter.
Oh, we'll have to dive into that a little bit. Now, understand there are definitely rules that you live and die by that are your Reggie-isms. Tell the listening audience a little bit. Most of these were kind of developed during this period, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I learned a couple of them from Homer, who was one of the partners. You know, one thing he said: you make your money when you buy. I didn't really understand that when he first said that, but it's true though. If you buy something at the right price, you can always get your money back. You know, and perhaps still make a profit. That was one of the ones that he taught me. Another one was I'd rather cry for it than cry over it.
Oh yeah.
In other words, don't overbuy something. I'm all about taking baby steps. Start small with something. If it sells, then end up getting more later, instead of just diving in head first and learning the hard way. So that was another one. But
talking about the loan, when you said it was just $25,000, that's another one that you always say, and I even repeat that to customers that apply to do business with us. That start off small, take baby steps, crawl before you walk.
That's right. That's another.
There's another Reggie-ism.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for young entrepreneurs or just people just starting in a business. Don't think you have to start off like with spending a lot of money. You know, spend what you can afford to spend.
And grow with your business.
That's right.
I mean, I see a lot of restaurants open up. They make it so beautiful that they can't afford to buy the first or second order of liquor and food.
Yeah. Oh, we see that all the time.
Well, another important thing I want to make is with this line of credit. I was able to use that line of credit and always pay my invoices on time. Okay, I think that's so important. I get hit up all the time by people that are just opening up a shop for the first time, and they're wanting me to give them terms.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way, man.
Yeah.
And so what I try to tell people, they can use credit card now. See, back in the day when we started, you couldn't even pay your bills with a credit card. Wholesale. But now we take credit card for payment. So that's a great way for somebody to get started. I always tell them, look, use a bank to build your business. They're in the business of loaning money. But don't expect someone that's already in business like myself. I'm not in the business of loaning money.
Right.
I don't bankroll retail stores. I carry the goods that'll help them, grow their business. So anyway, that's always been something I tell people. If you can get a line of credit, build a relationship with a bank, start small, turn it into something over time, and always pay your bills on time. Because if your reputation is that of someone that pays their bills, it'll all come out in the wash in the long run, because all your competitors aren't going to be doing it that way.
As a successful entrepreneur, that's great advice to give the people that listen to Dollars and Sense. That advice is so key. And I think a lot of people do put the cart before the horse, and they try to overdo it and overspend. Yeah. So you had this vision and you see this thing working, but it's not bringing in a cash cow. Yeah. You were able to buy out your partners because they didn't see the long term that you saw. When did you know that this distributor thing was taking off?
Well, a couple things happened. One thing, there's a company that's called NHS, and they're a skateboard distributor in California. Well, under the umbrella of NHS is Independent Trucks, Creature now, which Creature didn't exist then, Santa Cruz Skateboards, OJ Wheels, Slimeball Wheels, Bullet Wheels. They had a lot under one roof. Well, when those guys opened me up, that was like the first step to really being on our way to doing something and be able to do volume. Because when you're in wholesale, you got to do volume because you're working on small margins.
Oh yeah.
So you got to do volume to make money. That was one thing. The main thing, though, other than that, was a company called World Industries, started by this guy, Steve Rocco, and Rodney Mullen was actually a partner. But anyway, he took a lot of market share when he started. And what he did is he he went after some of the big companies in the industry. And, that was kind of hard on me because some of those companies were friends of mine. And I didn't even carry some of them, but I wanted to carry them. And this guy it was like the David and Goliath deal.
Yeah.
He was tiny, but he started poking fun at the big guys, and the kids liked that.
Yeah.
And so he created a demand for his products through brilliant marketing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was a friend of mine. We used to compete against each other in the contest. We had respect for each other from our skateboarding.
Yeah.
But so he gave me an opportunity. I had to pry it out of him because in the beginning he wasn't going to use a distributor. He was going to sell everything direct.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I was like, but he didn't have capital, right? Yeah. And so I was like, look, I had enough faith in his products. I knew I could sell everything I could get my hands on. So I said, look, I'll front you. I'll prepay for the product. How about that? I'll pay you weeks in advance.
Wow.
And you can take that money and you can go to the wood shop. You can get the decks made and then fill my orders. Because he was a friend and I trusted him. I knew he would do me right, and he did. But so there was one model that this guy named Mike Vallely had. It was called the Barnyard, and it was a skateboard that had a graphic of a bunch of different farm animals on the bottom. I mean, to this day, it's one of the best skateboard graphics in the history of our industry.
It.
Yeah, they just reissued it again.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would get 500 at a time, and I'd sell them all in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
They'd be gone.
Yeah.
And that's the first taste we had at actually doing volume. When you're getting 500 of one model in, selling it, and anyway.
And it was gone that quick.
It was gone that quick because of the demand that he created with his brilliant marketing. And see, we're not marketers. We're wholesalers.
Now, a lot of these deals were deals that you had set up that they weren't selling to Ocean Avenue, your friend Bruce Walker down in Florida. They were deals that they were selling to you only, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I'm very fortunate for that being the case. It wasn't just Ocean Avenue in Florida. There were several other distributors in the country that wanted the stuff bad. And, being that Steve Rocco and I had this relationship, and plus he's a shrewd businessman. He wanted to sell as much direct as he could without using any distributor.
Yeah.
But by our friendship and the business relationship, right? He was loyal to me.
That's one of the things that continues to resonate with this conversation is having that good friendship and that good relationship with the people that you're working with. We're going to take one more commercial break, and we're going to continue this conversation with Reggie Barnes and Jocelyn Tracey from Eastern Skateboard Supply here on Wilmington's Big Talker FM 106.7 Dollars and Sense.
There's nothing in this world that brings folks together the way music does. We've always loved that feeling, and it's a true joy getting to share it with the Wilmington community here at Burnt Mill Creek Billiards. We're proud to be the premier jazz club in town, offering live jazz 2 nights a week and a wide selection of other genres as well. On Wednesday nights, we have the New Jazz Trio, and Thursday nights, Stevie Mac's International Food Truck is here with rotating bluegrass, folk, and Americana bands. We end the weekend with Benny Hill's Sunday Jazz Jam. We keep the drinks flowing along with good tunes and good times, and we say the more, the merrier. We encourage locals and visitors alike to stop in as often as they please to dance, drink, sing, laugh, and enjoy that sweet, soulful sense of community that only music provides. Burnt Mill Creek is available for private events like weddings, rehearsal dinners, or any other group get-together. Check our Facebook and Instagram accounts for upcoming live music and events.
Welcome back to Dollars and Sense on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. I'm your host, Hunter Ford. With me in the studio today, again, is Reggie Barnes and Jocelyn Tracey from Eastern Skateboard Supply. Before the last break, we were talking a little bit about how important it is to establish relationships with the other people that you're doing business with and attract brands, and old and new, to become part of your distribution. And you had set up a couple really important deals that were exclusive to you. How did some of those deals come about?
Well, they came about really because the owners and myself were friends from having been skateboarders and competed against each other. That's how we got to know each other. And then the fact that I had gone into the distribution route, and these guys that lived in California that were about my same age, they wanted to make the transition from being a skater to being a business person and make their living in skateboarding, right? Well, there's not room for as many distributors as there is for brands, right? So a lot of those guys that were skaters started their own label.
Yeah.
And like I said, one was World Industries, and I mean, the list goes on and on about the other brands that came about. Another big one that came about after World Industries was a company called New Deal.
Oh,
And that was owned by Paul Schmidt. To this day, Professor Schmidt, they call him. And he's, I would say, the best manufacturer of skateboards in the world. He's probably built more than anyone.
Oh, yeah.
And as is, he is known for making the best boards. Okay.
I mean, that's the thing to be known for when that's what you do.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyway, so Schmidt, he moved from Florida to California back in the early 80s, and he started a company called Schmidt Sticks, which back then was one of the biggest brands.
Huge.
But unfortunately for Paul, when he did that deal, he did it with a businessman and ended up kind of getting the short end of the stick. In other words, the other guy that was his partner ended up owning the name.
Oh.
And so after years and years of Paul seeing his partner making all the money, he decided to break away and start his own thing, right? And he started a company called New Deal, okay? Well, he had a lot of great riders, okay? And the way it worked back then, the brands that had the best skaters were the brands that sold the most boards.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And so he started New Deal. Well, the fact that I had World Industries, the brand that I mentioned earlier, that really carried a lot of weight and had a big share of the market. Now, you got to realize it in this time period in skateboarding, this is late 80s, early 90s, skateboarding as a whole was kind of in another slump. But the brands that I carried, I was the small distributor, they had a big share of a small market, which was a decent amount of volume, right?
Yeah.
So being that I had World Industries, almost every shop in the United States, to be successful in skateboarding in that era, you needed to carry World Industries, okay? Well, that gave us a lot of accounts at Eastern Skateboard Supply. So people started looking at us as, we want to ride on the shirt tails of some of the other brands that Reggie's carrying at Eastern, right? So New Deal is a prime example. The fact that I had World Industries, he thought, well, a great way for us to get into the market is to be sold through the same distribution networks as World Industries and some of the other popular brands. So they came to us.
So now you've grown, and this business has really taken off well, and you needed more space.
Yeah, we outgrew the place in Raleigh where we started. And I wanted to buy instead of rent again. And being that I had started the business from Wrightsville Beach, I really wanted to get back to living in Wrightsville Beach, Wilmington area. And when you're a wholesaler, your location is not that important.
Yeah.
What is important is your proximity on the East Coast is important, but I'm saying not necessarily what city.
Yeah.
So I could move from Raleigh to Wilmington and not miss a beat. I'm in the same UPS zone. Get my toll-free number transferred down here. We closed on a Friday in Raleigh. We opened Monday morning down here in Wilmington in a new building with the same number and everything, and our customers didn't experience any change whatsoever.
You brought up UPS. Now, shipping for a distributor has got to be one of the biggest parts of your business, negotiating a good shipping rate.
Yeah, it is. It's a big deal, and I've been using UPS since 1985. We also use FedEx, and bringing in freight. We use tractor trailers, and at the time when we started doing volume in Raleigh, we used Roadway.
Yeah.
And I developed a very good relationship with the Roadway company, and they were the terminal that we used was out of Wilmington. A guy named John Lomas was my contact here, and we became great friends. And when it was time to move from Raleigh to Wilmington, when I found a building here, they backed up a trailer in Raleigh and moved us down here for free.
Oh, wow.
Which
That's
I'll
a
never
relationship.
forget. Yeah, it's great. That's the kind of relationship we had. See, Roadway wasn't set up to do billing within the state. So they did that as an act of good faith, for the business we did with them.
Now, it's kind of interesting. We were talking off air a couple minutes ago about how your UPS driver, after you had grown and outgrown the 4,000 square feet that you were in here after the move to Wilmington, he kind of set you up for the next move to the even bigger facility that you're in now, right?
Yeah, he did. He could tell that we were having growing pains. We were busting out the seams. I left out the building down here that we moved to when we moved from Raleigh down here. It was in the 4,000 something square foot range. But before we moved out of that, I added on to it twice.
Oh, wow.
So that goes back to that taking baby steps thing Jocelyn mentioned earlier. I didn't want to go too far too quick, right, and borrow a bunch of money. So added onto it twice. Then we needed to move into a bigger building. And the UPS driver, of course, he was at my place every day, twice a day. He said, you might want to mention to that guy down the road that you'd have an interest. So I did, and long story short, we ended up getting the building that we're in now, and it's 60,000 square feet, and it was perfect for what we do.
Now, Jocelyn, you kind of came in after that move and kind of helped take this bunch of skateboarders and help really make it more of a business, help really knuckle down and kind of straighten these skateboarder guys out and make the business successful more.
Oh, yeah, I would say maybe just to help tweak a little bit. I would approach our sales team and say, we're not just selling to skateboarders anymore. You're going to have the father of a skateboarder wanting to open up a shop. And, we need to speak to these people a little bit differently. I just come from a background of customer service and retail my whole life. And so those are just little things, just trying to polish the guys up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Now they could run circles around me as far as it came to the skateboarding industry, the history. They live and breathe it. Same with surf, and I respect that. And you need to have that knowledge. And there's just a few things that I could help with, and even just way we packed orders for it, to be shipped to the customer, that it looked decent. It just wasn't being thrown into a box. And not that it was ever that bad, but there was just few things that we could tweak.
Yeah, touch up on, make better. Yeah. A woman's touch can always help the final product.
That's right.
So business is really going well. 2007 and 2008 seem to be your biggest years, right?
Yeah, that's when we did the biggest volume.
And it's funny, that's right about the same time that I got started working with you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, things are really going well, and you had an opportunity to buy out your competition, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, I had purchased Ocean Avenue, my friend Bruce Walker. That was in the early 2000s. And then just 3 years ago, I purchased South Shore, which was a big competitor of mine in Houston, Texas. And the main reason I did that was because of how much freight is going up, okay? Yeah. And, it's increased like a lot of people have no idea, I don't know if you realize or not, but, it used to be the zone you shipped a package to and how much it weighed. That determined the cost, right? Well, now it's configured by the dimensions. Yeah. Whichever's greater, either the dimensions or the weight. You're going to pay whichever's greater. So it's gone up a lot. We used to get our shipments in, it'd be like 2 to 3% of the cost of the goods. Now sometimes it's 10%.
Now, this conversation's been incredible, and an hour is just not long enough to pack everything in. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a segment that we're going to add on to Facebook so we can continue to tell a little bit more of these stories and still stay within our umbrella. Reggie, thank you guys for coming on the show today. You and Jocelyn, we really appreciate it here on Dollars and Sense on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.